us today. We'll get started in just a moment. Before we dive into today's topic, I have just a few quick housekeeping items to cover. Recording, yes, we will be recording today's session and we'll be sending out an email to you with the link to it. Q&A, if you have any questions along the way, please drop them in the QA box at the bottom right of your screen. We've set aside some time at the end to answer as many as we can. And now let's look at the topic that we'll be covering today. Cyberattacks on CNI are a major concern as energy, water, and communications are vital for a normal life. And this sector faces increasing cyber challenges. And although most businesses prioritize cybersecurity, many still rely on subjective scores and complex spreadsheets for risk assessment. We will explore the shift from subjective scores to data-driven risk intelligence. Guiding us through to this today is Robin Oldham, founder and CEO here at Cydea. Robin, thank you for being here. I'll hand the virtual mic over to you.
Thanks, Arianna, and thank you all for joining us this morning. My pleasure to be here with you on a bright Tuesday morning. I'm really looking forward to chatting to you all about how cyber risk intelligence helps critical infrastructure keep the lights on. First off, a little bit about me. So I'm, as Arianna said, I'm Robin Oldham. I'm the founder and CEO at Cydea. We are an optimistic cybersecurity company helping people build confidence in how they do risk management rather than trying to scare people with fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We work with hundreds of organizations, many critical infrastructure and essential services operators to understand their risk, get buy-in for security improvement, change programs, and protect the world that we live in. Outside of my day-to-day work with Cydea, I'm also a non-exec at the British Library, helping them recover from their cyber attack. And I also write a popular weekly information security newsletter. I know a few of you today are subscribers. If you're not already, you can do that down below. Almost 8 years every week on the bounce now. So check that out as well. So probably best place to start. Few people when we talk about risk intelligence, the logical first question is, well, what is risk intelligence? We see it as risk intelligence being the engine that powers your ability to forecast, to manage, and to adapt. It's not technical indicators of compromise. If you're thinking of an evolution of threat intelligence, maybe it's what you need to do to take your security program and to translate it for the business and your stakeholders. So whereas in the old world, that might have been kind of reactive annual risk assessment exercises, subjective scores, and whatever the hell this file name is, risk intel is about being responsive and almost sort of real-time risk assessment and understanding what's going on, being data-driven and adopting quantitative approaches, and being collaborative with different platforms and tools, bringing people from across the business together to understand and work together to help manage cyber risk and improve resilience. And out of that, you can generate a whole load of insights on relevant risk scenarios to your organization, the frequency with which they're occurring for your size of business, in your industry, in your geography, how you think about and measure the consequences of risk events, and validate them by comparing them to your own instance and lived experiences. Risk and incidents are two sides of the same coin. An incident is a risk manifest. If you've had an incident and you can't find it on your risk register, there's a bit of a gap there and you should be adding it. Equally, if you're trying to work out how often something might occur to your organization and what the potential impacts might be, looking backwards at some of your incidents is a great place to start. So yes, ransomware can be hugely disruptive to your organization, but maybe you're also seeing attempted ransomware attacks and near misses on a more frequent basis. You can use that to refine your assessment. So you can see where to focus, why it matters, and crucially, how investments might reduce that risk. If you're quantifying it in pounds and pence or dollars and cents, you can weigh that against security programs and other controls that you might put in place and work out whether they're a worthwhile investment or not. It puts security teams on the same level as other folks going to the board for investment, be it marketing, sales, revenue, capital projects, and improvements to infrastructure and so on. And cyber attacks on critical national infrastructure continue to grab the headlines, rightly so. If we want to maintain a normal way of life, both in work and leisure, then we need energy, water, communications, financial services. Yet the sector is facing a growing cyber challenge. Critical infrastructure worldwide was hit by over 420 million cyber attacks between January 23 and January 24, equivalent of 13 every second. I suspect a lot of those are near misses rather than successful attacks, but this is a 30% increase compared with 2022. So it shows that attackers are scaling their campaigns dramatically. Against at the same time, the FBI has reported a 9% year-on-year increase in ransomware complaints against US CNI. Manufacturing, healthcare, government and IT services have all been impacted, according to Reuters. Incident reports also reflect both the frequency and the sophistication of attacks are increasing sharply, and as of 2025, with adversaries exploiting edge devices, targeting operational technology environments, and blurring the lines between state-linked and criminal campaigns. Over the past 24 months, Cydea has been working with one of the UK's primary electricity distributors to strengthen their cybersecurity and keep the lights on, literally and figuratively, amidst this increasing scale and complexity of cyber attacks. And customers like this understand the need for change, as I'm sure many of you do as well. We quote here from one of them, "We knew the evolving threat landscape required more than just basic defenses. We needed a strategic shift in how we approached cyber risk." They knew that staying ahead of emerging risks and the ever-changing threat landscape, they needed to mature their security practices by enhancing both their strategy and their operations. Fortunately, that aligns with the regulator's desire to uplift security of national infrastructure in general, and the enhanced profile of NCSC's CAF take operators of essential services from being able to protect themselves and respond to attacks from unskilled and unmotivated adversaries to being able to protect themselves and recover from motivated, well-funded, advanced persistent threats. Against this backdrop then, why is this a problem then? Why are we talking about risk intelligence? Well, whilst some in the CNI sector are forward thinking like this, others are lagging behind. And in the UK as a whole, and as regulations increase to include a broader range of smaller businesses, 75% of UK businesses say that cyber is a high priority. This is where I think regulation is important. And like I say, recent changes to expand the range of organizations covered, for example, under NIS and so on, is welcome. Because whilst the majority say security is a high priority for them, less than a third have ever conducted a risk assessment. And that's despite risk being the cornerstone of most good practice. I think way back, this must be 15 plus years ago, NCSC's 10 steps to cybersecurity. It's obviously the cornerstone of things like ISO 27001, NIST cybersecurity framework, NCSC's CAF. And that means that most organizations don't know if they're spending too much or too little on cybersecurity, and if they're focusing their efforts on worthwhile endeavors and protecting the right things. Is it any wonder then that no one knows when enough is enough? That security teams struggle to communicate the importance of what needs to be done and why their business leaders are not confident about their cybersecurity posture and spend. In the best case, they spend too much, which isn't good for business results. So in the middle, security teams are stressed and constantly trying to firefight. And worst case, suffer a breach or a cyber attack. And for OES, that can be hugely impactful by their nature on a large number of people, disrupt public services. There's no single blueprint for cybersecurity, and risk being the cornerstone of modern security frameworks acknowledges that. This quote on the screen now is from NCSC's cyber assessment framework, underpinning a lot of the regulation of the CNI sector. There are some basic hygiene factors that you should get on with. Think cyber essentials, MFA, antivirus, patching. But over and above that, we need to be informed by and tailored to your organization, your activities, and how you're protecting yourself. Identifying the scenarios you face, analyzing their impact and likelihood, and evaluating them against your risk appetite. There's no single blueprint, and organizations need to take steps to determine their security risks that could affect the operation of their essential functions. Sounds pretty straightforward. And risk can also be used to communicate why. By using risk and risk reduction as the why for any actions, all stakeholders can be confident that resources and grants were being correctly allocated and funded. It is that translation layer that helps you talk to the business, regulators, other key stakeholders, and so on. the why we need to do something, or why we need to do this much of something, it becomes much easier when you've looked critically at what the scenario is that you face and what you're trying to communicate out of that, expanding them to form sensible narratives and stories that you can use to communicate to execs, but also the why behind, well, how frequently these things might occur and what the severity of any potential consequences might be. And using quantitative methods preserves your thinking in this space, making it easier to aggregate and communicate the scale of the problem. There's a bunch of problems with PIGs, or probability impact graphs, these kind of lovely 5x5 risk matrices that we see, that we don't have time to go into today. I'm happy to pick up conversations offline or separately about those. But we use these approaches with the UK energy company to justify an 8-figure investment case to their regulator. And it only took 2 weeks elapsed time to get to this result. It was probably way, way easier than you might think to get started. So where qualitative assessments were difficult to communicate, there was quite a lot of ambiguity, quite coarse answers there. It's a 3 out of 5 or a 4 out of 5. By quantifying risk, we were able to give clear answers that were easy to update as things changed as well. Preserved thinking was a great way for engaging business stakeholders, makes it really easy to update as you go back to map controls and track compliance, and yeah, just fundamentally kind of iterate and improve. The quote there from one of our CISO clients is the ability to tangibly demonstrate how our security efforts directly reduce the risk faced by our business. No more educated guesses or waiting for the next risk assessment. It made a material difference to how they were engaging other parties in their organization. And as I said, it's probably way easier than you think. And people talk about security should go out and engage the business and be a business enabler. Risk assessment is your way of being able to do that. So here's a worked example. We got input from across their organization, from IT, from operations, finance, legal, HR, you name it. It gave an opportunity for conversations to go and deeply understand the types of scenario that could impact them, and where similar had happened before, what the consequences were. Likelihood or frequency could be obtained from those previous incidents and near misses, from threat intelligence reports or expert opinion. And importantly, building out our risk scenarios like this made them trivial to update in the future. You can update them quarterly, monthly, or even more frequently. So you can see here, everyone knows risk is impact and likelihood, product of. And if you expand that impact and bring in business stakeholders, then you can get some pretty clear indication of what these values might be. So in their case, a cyber attack knocking out a substation, the regulations team were like, well, there is a fixed, and we've adapted some of the numbers here to make the maths easier to follow. There are some fixed penalties for any customer interruptions where people suffer a power cut. And then there are a scaling factor depending on the number of minutes that outages last. And we've got a bunch of data here that tell us, what potential different power cuts and different storm events and things have. And actually, thankfully, they were okay. But in one case, there was an example given where there had been a different physical accident involving some farm machinery in a substation, and that was able to inform what kind of the costs of rebuilding a substation might look like, as well as what the potential outage might look like. So far flung from perhaps APT attacks, but the consequences, the output, we had a lot more information than you might think. And it was quite easy to build up this kind of formula of what that might look like to arrive at a sensible number, a range of numbers. We're trying to be broadly accurate. 9 times out of 10, it's going to land in this range than super precise. And we'd taken a whole bunch of teams on this journey and got their input as well. So when it comes to presenting back to senior stakeholders, they're already bought in. They're the ones that have agreed to, the key numbers here would be regulatory penalties, or would be hardware replacement costs, or would be, so on and so forth. And then they can not like some of the numbers, and maybe there's a debate to be had about whether, how you might want to adjust those. But fundamentally, someone going, yeah, we know that's what would happen if we had, those are the consequences of having a power cut, having an outage, losing a substation. Well, that's pretty straightforward at that point. You just got to drop them in, turn the handle. And when it comes to updating, you can put revised numbers in, turn the handle. It's pretty straightforward and easy. You don't have to relitigate the whole thing. Like I say, much more nuanced than just saying this is a 3 out of 5 or an amber or something like that. Much easier, much easier to explain to stakeholders. And then we work with them to develop tooling that would not only support their internal governance, but also continuous improvement. So embedding risk intelligence and these feedback loops into their asset management and their service management software, allowing them to conduct dynamic risk assessments at an asset level, as and when the threat landscape or their IT environment changes. Security management systems often talk about continuous improvement. Your SOC, security incidents, nemesis are a valuable source of risk intelligence. They are a risk manifest, as I said earlier. Use them as such. Refine your estimates and update your assessment. And if you have an incident that doesn't match, you've got a gap. Go and have a look at it. Have a think. What might you be missing? Is that a whole category of something that you should be adding to your assessment? Has someone just not understood potentially what the incident was? Use it as an opportunity to learn and grow. Ultimately, you're aiming for accuracy, not precision. Pick a range that means that you're right 90% of the time and then refine it. No one can forecast risk to, £137,923 and 35.17 pence. If you can do that, quit cyber, go and play the lottery. Otherwise, focus on broad accuracy, not super precision. You're not trying to get to that perfect answer. Don't let perfection be the enemy of success. Close the loop. Incidents are risk manifest. Quant and variables make it super quick and easy to update. And yeah, aim for accuracy, not precision. And you'll get these kind of, this is an example from ISO 31000 and 27005. It gives you that feedback loop to monitor, review, and obviously to communicate out from that as well. I want you to sub Cydea here for doing risk properly in this quote, but this was the outcome from one of the senior management team at our client. Cydea's work didn't just tick boxes, it helped us unlock serious investment and confidence from our stakeholders. Obviously, we're proud, but there's nothing stopping you following in the same footpath. Doing risk properly was the key thing here. Also, doing risk in a quantified manner helped unlock a bunch of the benefits that we talked about this morning. So going beyond static once-a-year risk assessments, the organization now has the capability to monitor control compliance and turn that into framework compliance in real time. They can also assign risks to assets dynamically as architecture change or the threat landscape evolves, and fundamentally just faster, better stakeholder reporting. Appreciate that's been a really, really whistle-stop tour in the last kind of 20 minutes or so. But I want to make sure that we've got good kind of 5 or 10 minutes for some questions. So thank you ever so much for your time. If you want a great leg up on quanting your cyber risk, check out Doug Hubbard's How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity Risk book. It's a great primer. Also Tony Martin Vegi's Heat Maps to Histograms, recently published. Also a great read. And yeah, with that, thank you. And please, any questions? I think, Ariana, maybe you've got some in the chat or elsewhere that you can feed to me.
Yes, there's one coming through just now. It seems like it's quite time consuming. How long did it take and what's the upfront and ongoing time investment?
So perils of webinar. So in this example, I suppose, if I zoom back quickly, we took people from essentially zero to a £10 million plus investment case in 2 weeks. That was the kind of the upfront investment, if you like, from a standing start, elapsed time. So obviously there was everyone was motivated to get on and try and get some answers here, but the upfront investment needn't be huge. The most important thing is to start. And in terms of ongoing, by building out your scenarios like this, and as I was saying, if you kind of, the hard work is modeling it the first time and working out what those different pieces might look like. When it comes to updating that, you can update it on a frequency that makes sense for your business, but it's just a case of getting whatever those values might now be. So if you were a manufacturing business worried about ransomware, maybe ransomware is a product of lost revenue for you because you operate 24/7, 365 maybe. If you were making 365 million pounds worth of revenue a year, that would be £1 million a day. You could look at what a typical ransomware incident duration is, maybe 10 to 14 days. £1 million a day times 10 times by 14 gives you a 10 to 14 million pound range. Easy for you to communicate to COO, CFO, and so on. If your revenue doubles, well, now that is a 20 to 28 million pound risk to your organization on the consequence side of things. So you can, I think, at first it can seem like it might be more complex, but I think, it's much easier than you might think to get started. So hopefully that's giving you some confidence, and like I say, that the How to Measure Anything book's also got some good suggestions and primers to get going quickly.
Next one is, what tools did you use?
Obviously Cydea has a platform ourselves that we use in our consulting engagements and that's available for people. But you can also conduct these kind of assessments using spreadsheets if you really, really wanted to. I think they don't lend themselves very well to the kind of collaboration and kind of you end up in that kind of version control kind of hell, and definitely the some of the simulations can be a bit more taxing, and formulas liable to get overwritten. But yeah, there's a bunch of tooling out there for doing cyber risk quantification. We're one vendor. What we presented here today is kind of tool agnostic. You can take yourself and go and build on. But yeah, it also underpins how we think about the problem here at Cydea. And if you think that's useful, then we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. And last one is, how does this compare to other CRQ models like FAIR?
Yeah, so FAIR, probably one of the world's most widely known CRQ models. It's well-intentioned, but in my opinion, quite difficult to get right. And that's borne out by lots of feedback from practitioners and analysts alike. It is comprehensive in how it thinks about it, and it's quite bottom-up in how you'd go about doing your analysis. And I think that is one of the reasons why maybe going back to some of those previous questions about time, if you're trying to do anything bottom up, it's quite time consuming and complex. It is better to start and think top down. How do we get a broadly accurate picture based on what we know about our business, than having to go around and understand the configuration of every one of the organization's 4,500 devices and what networks they sit on and what the firewall rules are and. I think that's where it becomes, you fall into that perfection trap, and you spend so long trying to understand the problem that it's all shifted, and then you feel like you've got to start again. So FAIR, there's a lot of good in FAIR, and definitely people have succeeded. It's not the only way of going about doing it. I think the most important thing is that you have a way of being able to look at how you're arriving at the results and that they're explainable. And that's where I think using that ransomware example, for example, we've got daily revenue times by outage. Those are really simple concepts for people to be able to understand and kind of grasp outside of the cybersecurity sphere. And if people have gone, yeah, I understand that, that is a logical way of thinking about this problem, then you can just drop the numbers in. There's no kind of trying to explain to them about threat event frequency and loss magnitude this and secondary impact. It's just a much easier way of approaching things in the first instance. So you could absolutely, again, apply what we talked about today using FAIR. I found that it can be a bit trickier to get going with, and can fall foul to perhaps some of the sentiment that's underlying some of the previous couple of questions.
Perfect, thank you. No other questions from the audience.
Great. Well, in which case, look at that. We're almost spot on the half an hour, or just under. So thank you ever so much for your time this morning, everyone. genuinely, if you've got questions and things like that, very happy to have a chat. You can find me on LinkedIn, Robin Oldham. That's what I look like. Or like I say, subscribe to my newsletter. Or we'd love to hear from you if you think that what we've been doing at Cydea could be relevant for your organisation. Yeah, feel free to drop me a line, and yeah, we'll have a chat with one of our consultants. Always up for hearing from people solving interesting and challenging problems. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.